Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Waystation. This is Season 2, and I'm your host, Rebecca Darren-Ellis. Nobody in particular, and also just like you. In every episode of the Waystation, we explore first-person stories, each told on a common theme, but from vastly diverse perspectives. We'll introduce you to everyday, real people whose lives are seemingly different than yours. Or are they? Perhaps through these stories, you may find that you and me and he and she and they and them are more alike than we're willing to admit. And now a thank you to my friends at Pioneering Collective. This podcast is powered by Pioneering Collective, an executive thought leadership firm combining personal PR, coaching, and networking to transform hard-earned wisdom into heavyweight impact. Learn more at pioneeringcollective.com. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about the strange but true things that have happened in our lives. This was such a fun episode to do and a little freaky at times, at least for me. I don't know how you will feel, fellow travelers, when you're listening to it, but we heard some stories about ghosts and UFOs and all sorts of things that, frankly, when I was a kid, I was terrified of, which is funny because now I love to watch sci-fi. Like, one of my favorite shows is Black Mirror. I love Stranger Things. But when I was a kid, I was really uncomfortable with the unexplained things. And for some reason, I took this idea of religion and made it into a ghost story. So like, I had this super religious grandmother who had candles and figurines all around her apartment. And whenever I slept over there, it was like these faces of Mary and Jesus and Joseph and all of these people, wise men, whoever, that were lit up in the dark. And so my mind would just go insane, like thinking about what if these came to life. And then as I got a little older, I would have what maybe were bad dreams, but I would swear that I was awake and I would see like this little girl in the corner by my bedroom. And so it's interesting that these all grown-up people came onto this show to talk about these experiences that they've had with these strange occurrences in their lives that felt very, very real and very, very true. In fact, they do believe them to be real. And now me looking back and thinking about it and being like, okay, so there were some pretty weird things that happened in my life that I just kind of brushed off as being, I don't know, a dream or my crazy imagination. And I think that now I'm much more open-minded to these sorts of things. In fact, I'm going to share with you that about a week and a half ago, I went to see a shaman because I have always been curious about what goes on in my mind and in the minds of others. And I really like neuroscience and I'm really interested in psychology. And I've always taken intellectual routes to discovering these new things. But I felt lately like I'm just tired. My brain is mush. We're 2 years into a pandemic. I'm a toddler mom and I don't have time for all this intellectual stuff, but I feel like there needs to be some sort of energetic shift. So I went to a shaman, and talk about strange but true. This woman had so much insight, or at least was given by this other realm. If you don't know anything about shamanism, I'm not going to take up too much time talking about it now, but there is this higher conscious dream world that the shaman travels into on your behalf and then comes back to you with messages from your spirit guides that show up. Strange but true. And the messages that came back, there's no way anyone could have known this about me. I talk a little bit about the episode coming up that I had a very close relationship with my grandmother, and at different points in my life, I would dream about her, or I would have what I thought were visits from her that I just brushed away because I was younger. And then in my adult life, people would tell me, you have this other presence here. It's a very nurturing, kind of motherly presence that, loves to cook. And, it's my grandmother. It is. But in this experience with the shaman, she came back and she told me that there was a healing tree, and it was my grandmother healing tree. And it had amethysts hanging, like stones hanging from the tree. And I keep this little amethyst at my desk now. And it was my healing tree, and I didn't realize it at the time, but amethyst is my husband and my daughter's birthstones. So it's interesting that this tree that was meant for healing had this unnatural thing growing from it. Amethysts don't grow from trees, but that my source of healing was coming from the family that I create. So that's what I took from it. It was really beautiful. It was a really profound experience. There was a bunch of other shit that's way too personal to really get into now. But yeah, I hope that this episode does for you what it's done for me, which is just open your mind to the possibilities of there being other or no explanation needed for the strange but true things in your lives. And to do that, I'm very excited to welcome Jessica Arbour and Jeremy Hurewitz, two very real people with very real, very honest, very true stories about the strange but true experiences in their lives. I hope you can relate. Very excited to have Jeremy and Jessica here today to talk about their strange but true stories, some of the odd occurrences that people most likely wouldn't believe, but actually happened to them. I'd love to start off with Jessica first. First, a little bit about Jessica. Jessica Arbour is a healthy relationships coach, massage therapist, and mindfulness facilitator, raised in New Hampshire and currently living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Jessica, whenever you're ready, would love to hear your story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rebecca. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm so excited to hear Jeremy's story. I can't wait. So looking forward to that as well. When I got the invite to participate in this strange but true, this is the one that resonated with me so much. I feel like I've had several different encounters in my life, but the one that I'm going to share here today is the one that I feel like is the most undeniable. Really, I mean, it's a personal story, so it's something that has a lot of meaning for me. And I thought, a lot of people don't get to hear this story very often. And I thought, well, this could be an opportunity for people to hear something like this. And hopefully it resonates with others out there who maybe have had similar but different experiences. I guess I'll just kind of frame this with growing up. I don't really have any concrete or memories of whether or not my family really believed in ghosts or odd encounters. I mean, I remember my mom definitely talking about she had some strange happenings with psychics, and she told those stories with a lot of energy and passion. And so I definitely have a little bit of that seed sort of planted in me where there are some kind of weird things that happen out there in the world that can't always be explained. And sometimes people have information about other people's lives that it's kind of kooky. It's kind of uncanny. And I think that as it relates to this story that I'm going to be sharing, that kind of planted the seed of there's definitely something else that takes place in the world and people can tap into something bigger than ourselves. So I'll just move into my story. So I was in my early 20s. At that time, I was living in Vermont, and a friend of mine had called me up. It was like a Friday evening, and she was a new friend. She wasn't someone that I knew very well. She was an acquaintance of mine for sure. And she said, hey, this is kind of last minute, but I've been invited to a sweat lodge ceremony, and I'm wondering if you might want to join me. And I had no idea what a sweat lodge ceremony was, just never had any exposure. And she gave me just very brief information about it. She said, well, we're going to have to bring some light dresses to wear. It's going to get really hot. We're going to go inside of this circular structure. It's this group of people. They're doing this sweat to support these other people who are basically doing a vision quest up in the mountain. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, that sounds like a really neat thing to be a part of. And I was game for it. And so she brought everything that we needed, and she came and picked me up. And the interesting thing too was that I wasn't a very spontaneous person. So getting a last minute invite like this to something that was really unknown was not something that I usually would have said yes to so easily. So that for me, when I really look back on that, that was something that was kind of unusual for me to just say yes and to agree to something that I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. So we arrive at the place where we need to be for this sweat lodge ceremony. And this group of people, they get us all set up, and we're making our tobacco bundles to offer to this Lakota. medicine man that is hosted, I guess had been hosted every year with that particular group of people. And as we were approaching the sweat lodge, you have to offer your tobacco to this beautiful man who's facilitating this spiritual ceremony. And so I'm offering the tobacco and I say hello to him and I feel really awkward and it's just, I don't even know what to say or do, I'm just so out of my element. And he looks at me in the eye and he says, "Thank you so much. And you're going to have a spiritual experience here tonight." And I thought, well, that's great. I mean, I didn't think anything really of it. I just thought, well, aren't we all here to have a spiritual experience? I didn't think that there was anything really super special about that. Then it soon became like really apparent to me that he wanted me to be in the sweat lodge in a very specific place. And so he had the hostess that was offering her land and her space for this was nearby, and he waved her over and he said to her, "I want to make sure that when we go into the sweat that she is sitting between myself and between you." And I thought, okay, maybe this is just because I'm a new person. So she got me all situated in the sweat lodge where I needed to be. I was like one of the first persons to go in, and everybody else got themselves situated as well. And then the sweat began. I mean, the cloth to the door came down. The hot rocks began being placed into the middle of the circle, and it was pitch black in there. And so what was so amazing was that even in this pitch black environment, the stones that were brought to facilitate the heat inside of the sweat lodge actually came from New Mexico. And it's the volcano, it's the basalt rock that we have out here. And so when they get really, really hot from being in a fire and then you bring them into the sweat lodge, they actually glow and this like deep red orangey color. And it gets incredibly hot inside of the sweat lodge. And so I had been told if I get really hot to just kind of place my face down towards the ground. So we're in the middle of the ceremony. People are singing and there's just a lot of song taking place inside. It was a really beautiful experience and I get really hot. And so at one moment during the sweat, I see my father's figure in the rocks. And I remembered feeling really agitated about this because months prior to this, the spirit of my dad was coming to visit me, and I was feeling really insane because I have never had experiences with quote unquote ghosts. This wasn't something that was normal for me, but my dad had passed away when my sister and I were 8 years old. That was obviously a trauma. And so there was definitely baggage around having that loss of a parent at that age. And so it really wasn't until this time in my 20s where I was kind of really grappling with the amount of grief that came with that loss. And so his spirit was like coming to me at night, and it was terrifying. Like I would be just falling asleep and he would be showing up. And there was auditory, like I could hear the crinkling of his leather coat. I could hear him crying. Like it was really scary. So here I am in this like beautiful spiritual setting. And I felt so incredibly annoyed that he showed up in the rocks. And so I put my face down toward the ground because I was like, okay, now I'm starting to hallucinate. I don't know if I'm going to pass out, but I need to just get some cooler air on me. So I place my face down to the ground. I cool off a little bit. I come back up, and this medicine man, his name was Phil Crazy Bull. I can't see him because it's very dark in there, but I feel his hands come towards my face and they're cool and they have the water on it because he had the water next to him for creating the steam to get the sweat lodge really hot. And I thought, oh, he just knows that I'm really hot and trying to make it so that I can cool down a little bit. I'm overheating. And it felt really nice to have his hands on my face, like patting the sides of my cheeks with the cool water. And eventually the sweat ends and we come out of the sweat. We change back into our day clothes and we enjoy a meal all together, a potluck dinner essentially. And so we're inside the hostess's house. And my friend and I were putting our plates of food together, and I see that Phil Crazy Bull is sitting at the kitchen table all by himself. No one is sitting with him, and he motions me over. And again, I felt that kind of like anxiety of, oh no, I don't know what to say. I just feel so awkward and insecure around this man who clearly has some distinct really spiritual energy about him. So I sit down with him. He invites me to come sit down. I sit down with him and we do a little bit of small talk. He asks me what I thought about the sweat and gives me a little bit of information about himself and how he's from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he works with a lot of men in the prison systems. And I thought, okay, great. Then all of a sudden, it just, as plain as day, he just looks at me and he says that wasn't me who put my hands to your face. That was your dad. And he wants for you to know that he's really sorry and that he loves you. And I just was like floored. I didn't even know what to say. It was just one of those moments. And my friend was sitting across the table and she got really sort of like, whoa, like what is happening here? Because she didn't know me that well at that point. She had no idea about any of my family history or anything like that. And so I think she felt a little like, oh, should I walk away? Is this going to turn into a super private conversation? And it just really, it rattled me, but then I wasn't that surprised either. And the care that he just exuded in that moment for me in this situation, and that he just said it so plainly, it was remarkable. And so, I really walked away from that experience 100% knowing when our loved ones, when they pass on, there's still a connection. There's still a thread that we can experience. And so I never had my dad visit me at night ever again after that experience. It really like closed something, I think. He really needed for me to know that he was sorry and that he loved me. And this man just happened to be the vehicle for that night. And nowadays he just kind of shows up with songs. I'll be thinking about him, and if I'm in the car and I turn the radio on, and it's like a song that reminds me of him. And so it's okay, there's still that little connection. And he does that to other family members as well. It's not just me. We all have this little like, oh yeah, I know he came and visited me today, this song on the radio. And so that really, it gave me a lot of peace. It's like, yeah, he's on the other side still trying to kind of fulfill like his role of being a parent, but he's just doing it from a non-physical place. So that's my story. Thanks so much for letting me share that.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Jessica. And it was, I'm a little choked up by it as well. I've had similar experiences with a loved one that has passed on as well that I never really took to be true at the time. Oh, this is just my imagination. It was when I was little, it used to happen to me a lot. And I would see specifically my father's grandmother. She would come see me in my dreams. I would see her in different places. And then as I got older, other people who I was friends with who maybe had intuitive or empathic tendencies, who didn't know my grandmother or didn't know my relationship with her, would say, I feel this presence here. Like I feel your grandmother here. And it's a really interesting, strange but true thing that, I guess I believe that we're all just energy and we return to being energy at the end of our lives. So where does that energy live? That's a really, really beautiful experience. And how awesome to meet somebody that could create that experience for you and just know exactly what you needed. So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear from Jeremy anything that resonated for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I found it really moving, Jessica. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm definitely a believer in these types of kind of metaphysical experiences, and I kind of gravitate towards them. So yeah, I was really moved by it, and it kind of coloring my thinking about some things that I'll share as well. But I was really moved by it and appreciated that story.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's a little full circle, like a little bit more of a thread to it that I forgot to include, which is that when I moved to New Mexico many years after, it was probably at least three years after that experience, an employer of mine at the time, we got to talking. Him and his family, they facilitated sweat lodge ceremonies in Taos. And I remember saying, oh, I've done one before. And he asked me who I did it with. And I told him, oh, it was this guy named Phil Crazy Bull from Albuquerque. And he was like, oh yeah, I knew him. And, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He passed away. And so it was like, oh, wow, there's I moved 2,000 something miles away from the original place of where that experience took place. And then here I am just getting like another little button just to kind of like button up that experience. I don't know. Another fascinating layer, I think.
I think my favorite part of that story was, and if you didn't say it, I was actually going to ask it, was the fact that your father stopped coming to you at night after that experience, that it had really closed a loop. It also makes me think of I don't know, like there is unfinished business there on their end.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that aspect of it, Rebecca. Yeah, I was super relieved because it was scary. You can come to me in dreams, but just don't scare me in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Jessica. We'll move on to Jeremy's story. I'm just like really excited to hear these stories. First, a little bit about Jeremy. Jeremy Hurewitz is a consultant, writer, and musician born in New York who divides his time between Brooklyn and Southern Vermont. He is the founder of Challenger Hill Consulting and the creator of Sell Like a Spy. Whenever you're ready, Jeremy, would love to hear your story.
Thanks, Rebecca. My story, I grew up in the suburbs of New York. Great family. I joke around with my family that I don't really remember much of my childhood until I was like a teenager and the hormones started kicking in, which I think is a tribute to my parents because it was a blissful and sort of happy and unscarred childhood. I always had a sense of kind of restlessness and maybe a streak of rebellion. And after college, I went overseas. And that's when, Rebecca, we started talking about this. I started thinking, well, I have plenty of strange and bizarre stories about my time overseas. And I hope to share some of those, but I do have kind of a more metaphysical one, I suppose, after what Jessica just shared. And, but, just to kind of put a finer point on the bio, I was abroad for about 10 years based out of Prague and Shanghai, and then came back to New York. And I've been working here in a variety of different fields. But I think what also contributes to this strange but true is that continued theme of kind of restlessness and a multidisciplinary background that has exposed me to a lot of different situations. And yeah, I guess giving me a bunch of different stories, but the one I think would be an appropriate one to tell after Jessica's really interesting one was when I was in college at University of Massachusetts, Amherst, my very good friend was a botany major, landscape architecture guy, and he went out to Nantucket on a internship for the second semester, the spring semester. And me and a friend went out to visit him, and it was early May. And if you know Nantucket, there's virtually nobody on the island except between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So we had like the run of the place to ourselves, and we went out in the evening or for sunset to Sconset, which is the easternmost point of the island. I've heard it described as the most eastern part of the United States. And it's a weird kind of mystical place out there. So we watched the sunset. It was totally beautiful. We knew there were going to be kind of high winds coming in, and we went up. We were kind of on the beach. We went up this cliffside staircase and went to one of the many mansions that were sitting on the cliffs there, and there was nobody around. So we just kind of made ourselves comfortable on one of the porches, being 20-year-old punks, 3 or 4 of us, and we're all kind of hanging out and sitting on the porch, and we're watching these lights in the sky. And it's really windy and it's kind of dark, and we're like, what is that? And there's kind of these lights darting about in the sky, and it just kept going. And we eventually got off the porch and looked up at the sky, and the wind was howling. I mean, it's hard to exaggerate how intense it was. But 3 of us stood there looking up. I don't know how to describe it other than a UFO. And there were 3 different reactions. One friend was just kind of drooling and like standing there looking up at it, trying to stay steady in the wind. Another was screaming like, what is that? What is that? And I was going, no, that can't really be there. And I kept kind of shielding my eyes and looking up. But it was there. And every time I kind of looked away and looked back, it actually seemed to be a little bit closer. And it was 2 silver discs kind of juxtaposed, and there were blue and red lights around it. And it was hard to register that it was real, and it was so loud with the wind. It was such an intense experience. And the really crazy side of it is that when I looked away for a moment at one point, I feel like I received some sort of message that was, do you want to have an experience? And before my conscious mind could actually reply, my entire being, my body just kind of screamed out, no. And I was so frightened. And I've never been that frightened in my life. I almost got killed on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, and on a rafting expedition. I've run from the police in third world countries and had all sorts of experiences, but I was so petrified to my bone. It wasn't spiritual. It was just deeply unnerving. And my friends and I ran, and, it's kind of like Stephen King hedges and the shadows everywhere with the wind. And it was so scary. I locked myself in a bathroom and just kind of was like, what just happened? And to this day, we all talk about that when I occasionally see some of those guys, one of whom lives out in Nantucket now. And I think what's really interesting and ties back in nicely to Jessica is that I've told that story many times. And a bunch of years ago, a friend of mine was making a short film called 1,000 Rooms, and they asked me to come in and tell a story about a room I lived in, an apartment I had, and how it made me feel, and a bunch of questions about it. And they were doing a short film on it. But my friend asked me to tell my UFO story, which I've told, for 20 years, and it's something I've gotten accustomed to. And so I told that story, and they made it the centerpiece of this 8-minute long short film, which was beautifully animated and shown at a festival in Santa Fe about 5 or 6 years ago, Jessica. I don't know, some visual arts festival. And it was really an amazing experience. It's meant to be shown as an exhibition with 4 walls, and you walk in and you wear headphones and you can pick it up at any point. But it was just such a beautifully rendered statement of what we went through, kind of what's out there, what's beyond what we know. And I would go on to become a journalist, and I care a lot about the truth, which is part of why it's such a hard time to live through right now in this era of disinformation and fake news and all of that. But I'm a skeptic. I'm somebody who examines the facts. I'm not somebody who kind of wildly takes on just about any spiritual fad or belief. But this is something that was really profound that happened to me. And I never expect anybody to truly believe me, but it was something that really shaped how I saw the world afterwards and understood things. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share to kick off here.
That's awesome. I'm curious, how did it change the way that you perceive things now?
It just created an even deeper respect for the unknown, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it drove me to become a journalist even more because of wanting to get to the bottom of things in a certain way. I think that's one side of it. And my explanation is going to be a very kind of me explanation. I'm very kind of, the Whitman quote about multitudes is one of my favorites, which is, do I contradict myself? I'm large, I contain multitudes, more or less. So there's the very practical side in that way, which made me hunger for sort of like, what's going on? How do I get to the bottom of things? And then also just gave me a real sense that whatever happened, that was not, I felt very strongly it was not some sort of like government thing. It was very deeply not of this world. And so I still am fascinated by UFOs, and I'm very fascinated by the modern conversation going on right now with the government coming out and saying there are things out there that we can't understand. And there are serious journalists putting out books right now about this research. And I'm actually really glad I'm living through that age of seeing that. Yeah. So I'm really interested in that conversation. So I think it shaped me in those couple ways. And it also taught me like how deep fear can go. And when I've experienced it at other moments, sudden bursts of fear versus longer anxiety, it's sort of given me a benchmark of what's truly scary, I'd say.
Oh, that's so interesting. How can there not be more greater things out there? When I think about the our world and the potential and how far we've come, isn't it kind of just ego that tells us that we are the end all and be all of everything, that there isn't any other maybe parallel universes and multiverses and the spiritual realm and all of these other things? Like how are these realities not reality just because they're not on our physical plane?
Yeah, even our sense of history and time. I'm really fascinated by the ancient alien theories, and how I think the best example is how civilizations in modern day Peru and modern day Cambodia 700 years ago had almost virtually identical temples, and they can't explain how some of these temples were built or the precursors that go hundreds or even thousands of years before them. I mean, it's just totally fascinating the way there's so much of a deeper side of this planet that we don't understand in its history. So I'm really fascinated by all that. And I think it taps into why I play music and spirituality that can't be captured by a book or a modern religion. So I like that watery definition of spiritual but not religious, but I think that's where it all comes in.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out part of your story where you were talking about, two things. One was that you grew up kind of itching for a larger experience because things were a little too easy, idyllic, really nice. But then as soon as this message came to you that said, do you want to have an experience? You were like, absolutely not.
It was too far.
That's more experience than I'm willing to have.
I'm interested in that too. There was some side of me that answered before my conscious mind could,
Yeah. But awesome that they asked for your consent. That's a lot more than humans do.
Yep.
This has been coming up for me a lot lately since I moved to New England, is Stephen King really has a huge impact on how we see New England and how we are freaked out.
Yes.
Jeremy, you just like opened up a topic that is truly one of my favorite topics. Those are some of my other strange but true encounters, is stories of UFO sightings and encounters. And people have been like, you gotta write this stuff down. Like, you can't just keep it to yourself. I just want to say, I just got really excited. I'm like, where is he going with this? Is it going to be a UFO story? I really was like, I hope this is where it's going. So I was excited that that's where it was. What I loved about it was that you weren't alone, that you had two other people with you.
Yeah.
And that it seemed to have captured all three of you, of course, in your own ways. But the fact that you actually had a collective experience, I feel like that helps it to be like even that much more credible, right?
Exactly.
Because it wasn't just you alone.
That's right. Absolutely. I'll be sure to get you that movie. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely let us know like where we could see, because it sounds like it was an experiential, like it's a whole, art space or something?
It was.
I guess it can't continually be so narrow.
Yeah, I pushed the filmmaker, who's a good buddy of mine, who's a brilliant guy named Brian Bowman, to show it other places, but I think he's moved on to other projects, and he views it as an installation and not something that's just kind of a standard screen type thing. And I respect his vision, but I think it's a profound and beautiful piece of artwork. The music is great. It's only 8 minutes long, so I'd love to share it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Please do. What was the name of it again?
1,000 Rooms.
1,000 Rooms.
Yeah.
And do you know if you could see it on
There's
video?
a video
or
link that I have that's still live. I'll have to check with the filmmaker whether we could share it more broadly. I think it's totally fine to share it with you too, so I'll just double check on that.
All right, cool. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know? Any sort of views that you now have that you would like to not impart, but maybe have people think about when these occurrences come up? Because I think that the initial inclination is to say it's a trick of the mind, or that it didn't really happen, and just push it away and forget about it. Or on the opposing end, to like have such a need for knowledge to explain exactly what happened, whether like to have it based in facts, so that it doesn't have to be this ethereal experience or whatever.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there, that people have a desire to make sense of things, to either dismiss it or just to explain it away. And, I've heard the phrase recently, like, sit with your discomfort. And I think that is the thing to do. I think interrogating it and thinking about different ways to explain it is fine, but not in an effort to just chalk it up, but to make sense of it and to learn from it, and to sit with the discomfort of maybe never knowing and seeing. For me, it's a creative impulse and a springboard to make things out of, and to examine that gray area, which is these ambiguities, I think, are an artistic genesis. They're a catalyst for expression, and that's how I've always viewed it. So it's a springboard for me, but I think you really nailed it in terms of either trying to explain it away or dismiss it. It's somewhere in the middle. I'd love to hear Jessica talk about her experience in that context too.
Yeah, I think like in the context of my experience with my father, I really did think I was going crazy. I really thought, wow, am I really mentally ill to be having this experience at night with my dad? And I felt really hesitant to share about it. I don't think I ever shared with my mom. I think I was telling my sister, and she was like, oh, wow, that's really, it's kind of cool that he's doing that. But I also see it's really scary. And I just don't even know how to help you. I don't know what you could possibly do. And I think to have had the experience with someone else who was such a third party person, being able to sort of validate, like, hey, this isn't so weird. We do have this tether to the other side, and it's okay. So let me just help to maybe calm this down. Let me just help close this down. And I think, I don't know about you, Jeremy, I'm curious, this would be a question. I have found when I have shared my UFO stories and encounters that I get met with such resistance, and that some people are either like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting, or they don't even have anything to say. And that's even more awkward, I think. And so with that context of the more unexplained, I have felt really frustrated, because I know what my experiences are. And of course, I've been able to meet other people who have had similar experiences like yourself. And So that helps me to know, yeah, I'm not alone in this. This is definitely happening out there. And my mom was a witness. My mom and my sister were both witnesses to this UFO encounter. Like, we were the trio. Like, it was you and your friends in your story, but in my trio was my mom and my sister. And so that helped to kind of feel like, oh, yeah, I'm not alone in this. But that resistance, it makes me afraid sometimes to really use my voice.
I think for me, the reaction over the last 20 plus years has varied as I've told it. I think some people want to laugh at me or laugh at the experience. I think others deeply want to believe it and they grab onto it and say, yes, I feel the same way. I think most people who hear the experience that know me a little bit and know, I was a journalist and I've had, other serious jobs, if you will, I don't know, whatever, how they might view me is the point, as somebody who maybe isn't the person that would, jump out at them telling those stories has added to it. So I always say what I said before, which is I don't expect anybody else to believe it. It's frankly not that important to me if others believe it. It's my experience. I took things from it. At this point today, a lot of my work isn't with Sell Like a Spy, is about communications and how to connect with people. And I think storytelling, being entertaining and engaging with people is really important. So to me, this is a real life experience that I can tell. I open myself up to potential ridicule or whatever when I tell that, but I've never really been afraid of that. And I think way more on balance, it's helped me connect with people and allowed me to have good conversations. And those are things I think about quite a bit when it comes to some of the stories, strange but true stories that I wind up rambling on about to people.
Yeah. And then if that doesn't happen, those are not your people.
Yep.
It's a really easy way to weed them out, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to some rapid fire questions. You'll each have the opportunity to go first. So I'll put each of you in the hot seat for every other one. We're going to start with Jeremy on this one. What's the best meal you've ever had, either because of the food itself, the company you're with, or the experience of it?
Oh, man. I really want this to be a good one. I'm tempted to talk about drinking Cobra blood in Taipei, but I don't know if I'd call that a meal, but it was certainly a strange but true experience that did happen. But I think just the most recent one was with my wife. So the company was the best it could be. In Mexico City recently, we were at a restaurant called Contramar, which is one of the most famous in Mexico City. And it's one of those few things in life that I found that lived up to its reputation. And the tuna tostadas and the atmosphere, which I think is equally as important to the food, or maybe close second, was just perfect. And it was just such a great overall dining experience that one of the best meals of my life.
Yeah. Atmosphere and presentation. I know that like sometimes it could be super ostentatious, but like I do appreciate a pretty looking plate.
I like the pretty, but I like more like the waiter that comes over just when I need a drink and like, is ready to refresh the wine or get me another beer or something, or just is there. That kind of great service makes the meal.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What about you, Jessica? Best meal you've ever had, either because of the meal itself, the experience, or the people you're with?
Actually, this makes me think of my endless adventure for the best fish tacos. And so we have a great restaurant up in Taos, and their fish tacos are the best. And I can't find any other place in New Mexico that replicates them. As of yet, I'm still trying. But yeah, that's a go-to. And I just feel grateful that I can still return to it over and over and over again. But it does feel like, wow, I don't know how they do this. It's just a balance of texture. You go up, you order, and then 5 minutes, your fish tacos are just right there. So if you're ever in Taos, New Mexico, you go to the Guad, as we call the locals, the Guad. It's called the Guadalajara Grill. North side, south side, north side. It's the bomb.
Nice. Next one, we'll start with Jessica. What's a popular opinion most people have that you don't agree with?
Oh, okay. Popular opinion. I think popular opinion is that you really have to work hard in order to live the life that you really want to live. I think that I come up across that. It's definitely something that's been really ingrained in me. If you are going to be successful, you have to work your tail off for it. And I just don't buy into that. I am all for passion. And so passion to me is quite different from hard work. And so if I find things that I'm really passionate about, like I was talking about this with my partner the other day, that I kind of feel like I'm already living a semi-retired life because I'm literally doing the things that I really love to do. And it doesn't necessarily feel like work. And so I think that is it's a place where people are really missing out on really enjoying and living life, is by thinking that they can't go and do the things that they really want to do and contribute to the world in the way they really want to and make money.
Yeah. It also brings up this idea of a deferred living, right? If you work really, really, really hard now, then later on you'll be able to retire, do whatever you want, travel the world, whatever. And it's like, well, what about this whole now? What about living and being happy right now?
Absolutely. Quality of life.
For
Yeah.
sure. What about you, Jeremy? A popular opinion most people have that you don't?
Yeah, I'll share that right away. But I also totally agree, Jessica. And as someone who moved to independent consulting fairly recently, I agree our society makes us feel like we have to be killing ourselves working 60 hours a week or we're somehow lazy or something. And I think we're rethinking that now, and it's a really good thing. As for the popular opinion, I hope this will fit the bill, but I actually speak about in Sell Like a Spy the idea that the cliche that we can't judge a book by its cover is wrong, and that you can judge a book by its cover. And I've worked with a lot of intelligence professionals, and that's what I'm teaching from now. And they will tell you that people show you who they are on the outside. So if you're at a business conference, how people wear their hair, their glasses, jewelry, their clothing, their shoes, people advertise who they are. And so you should base how you approach somebody who you might want to talk to and connect with, if you're a salesperson or whatever the case may be, based on some of those assumptions, is a smart assumption, and you should trust your instinct. The key thing is that it's a hypothesis that you can judge a book by its cover. And I think about that Walt Whitman quote I mentioned earlier, people are complex and they have multitudes. But trusting your gut and saying, I can judge a book by its cover, but be ready to be wrong or have that tested, is something that I think is generally wrong. You can judge a book by its cover most of the time.
In reality, like an actual book, who doesn't judge a book by its cover?
Right?
Like
yeah.
I do. I go to a bookstore, or, I'm flipping through stuff on my Kindle and I'm like, that cover sucks. I'm not going to read this book.
Or how about an album if you're buying a record?
Yeah. If you didn't pay attention to the cover, then why should I read or listen to you?
Right.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Jeremy. This next question first goes to Jeremy. What piece of art, a book, music, movie, etc., has had a profound impact on you?
I think I have a good answer for this one that might be kind of with the theme. I don't know the name of the painting, but throughout college, I had a Kandinsky print above my desk. And I love Kandinsky. I think he's amazing. And I moved to Europe in 1998 with a backpack and a guitar, joining that restless life, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I found myself in Western France, in Nantes. And I was literally going, what am I doing here? How did I get here? And why am I in Nantes? And I couldn't answer it. And I was kind of having an existential crisis. And I found that I saw a sign not afterwards saying there's a Kandinsky exhibition at the Musée des Beaux-Arts nearby. And I went to the exhibition, and there was that painting that was above my desk throughout college. And I got to see it in real life. And it felt like it signaled to me that I was on the right path. So I apologize that I can't remember the name of the exact painting, but it was a Kandinsky print that really moved me and had a big impact on my way forward.
Yeah. After this, if you wouldn't mind sending it, because I'm actually looking right now for a night sky image. Uh-huh. More on that later. So if you want to shoot it my way,
I'll try to track
really
it down.
Helpful. Yeah. Jessica, what about you? A piece of art, book, movie that has had a profound impact on you?
I don't know if any of you have heard of Florence Scovel Shinn, but she has this book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And so that book single-handedly has been one of the most profound spiritual influence on me in the past several years, especially trying to get through the pandemic and then a little bit beforehand. And really just continuing to try to find material that inspires me to live my full potential. That is like my MO. I want to do that. And so, the language, it's definitely dated, early 1900s. That's really when she had a lot of popularity, 1930s and even earlier. So it's kind of comical reading about some of the stories that she offers examples of how to play this game called life. But again and again, it's something I keep on my nightstand, and it just gives me what I need, even if it's just a couple sentences a day.
It's great. Thank you. Jessica, what's your favorite thing about yourself?
I think it's this desire to practice open-mindedness over and over. So Jeremy, in this idea of judging a book by its cover, it's like, I do get to trust my intuition. I do get to trust maybe what my initial impression is of people, places, and things. But yet I'm I still need to check my assumptions. And so I think for me, that's where this quality of remaining open-minded, where are the ways in which I can prove that perhaps I'm wrong? Because I like learning that I'm wrong. It gives me this opportunity to just continue to grow and to learn new things.
For a really long time, my mantra was, I don't know. Because I had this assumption for a really long time that I knew everything. And not just that I knew everything, but that everything was shit. Like I was just like, I know how this is going to work out. It's going to work out terribly. I was just like, not super negative, but I guess like too much of a skeptic. So I don't know is something that I, still try to remind myself. I don't know everything. None of us do.
Right.
Jeremy, what about you? What's your favorite thing about yourself?
Yeah, I think that my favorite thing might also be kind of my Achilles heel too, which is my comfort with risk and my ability to take risks, with whether it was, like I said, going abroad when I was 22 with a backpack and a guitar and, one-way ticket to Europe, or shifting careers a few times, or pursuing my own path musically too. I want to say this with a lot of humility, which is very necessary, but I feel like I have my own vocabulary that I've developed, and I'm really proud of that. And I think it's because I have a comfort with kind of forging my own path. That sometimes exposes me to pitfalls that I've experienced in life. But I think that having a real strong desire to make my own way and figure out who I am is mostly something I'm pretty proud of.
That's awesome. Last question, Jeremy. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, maybe it should dovetail in with something you and I were emailing about earlier. I like quotes a lot, and I was an English major. I'm a writer. I love to read. And I love this quote by Kurt Vonnegut: peculiar travel suggestions or dancing lessons from God. Because while I'm comfortable with risk and I do forge my own path, I can be more of a planner than a spontaneous guy. And sometimes I can be an automatic no sometimes, strangely. And I think that quote, which again is peculiar travel suggestions or dancing lessons from God, is a vote for spontaneity and the kind of beauty that random things that happen to you in life can be such an amazing path forward. So that was a piece of advice I got from a book that I try to think about regularly.
Yeah. Jessica, what about you? What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I think it's the saying, rejection is God's protection. And I know some people are like, I don't want to use that word God. So don't use something else. So for me, I can use it's the universe's protection. I think as a person who has been really averse to experiencing rejection, because I've actually experienced a lot of rejection, I think that saying for me, that rejection is actually the universe's protection, it helps me remind myself that's not where I'm supposed to be. That's not my door. That's not my person. It just reminds me I don't have to take it so personal. It just means I'm supposed to be somewhere else.
Yeah. What's really great about that is that you can really look back on your life and think about all of the times that you were rejected and have this reference moving forward saying, oh, okay, look how well that turned out when there was that rejection in my life. Look what happened next and next and next. So no matter how much you are bruised by a rejection now or will be bruised by a rejection later, you have this reference point to say, okay, I know that this is the case. It's going to be
it always works out for the best.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Jeremy, as well. And it's been a pleasure being here. I love hearing these kinds of stories. And I'd love to connect with you more, Jeremy, about this UFO stuff, because tip of the iceberg there.
Friend.
Yeah, it's just a pleasure to speak with both of you. And Jessica, I very much hope to keep in touch. And Rebecca, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thank you for being on, both of you. So what did I tell you, fellow travelers? That was a really fun, cool episode. And I'm I don't know, I'm just really jazzed up by that episode. I think that it was really affirming for me to have other people to talk about these experiences, and people like Jeremy, who talks about being very realistic, skeptical, practical minded. And still, there are these things that we just don't know. And why do we need to know? Why is this search for knowledge more important than this allowance for curiosity? And I feel like I don't want that need to know to ruin the magical things that I can discover about our universe, other universes, other realms, whatever is out there. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. As always, I think I'm going to have some more strange but true stories on our social media. So do be sure to follow the socials of the Waystation on Facebook as the Waystation Podcast, on Instagram at the Waystation Pod, and on LinkedIn at the Waystation Podcast. And now, Jeremy Hurewitz has kindly allowed us to play one of the songs from his solo music project called Rootless. And the name of the song is, you might have heard this in the episode, Peculiar Travel Suggestions. It's super cool, super mysterious. I love it. You might be listening to it right now as I'm speaking, and I hope that you're grooving along with it. Thanks so much for joining us today. See you next time.
you.